Hey gamers, Maniac here with GameAccess.net, trying something new a little bit. This is a new Tales from IT. It's a little redundant. It's not meant to be redundant, but the truth is that this video is a new experience, so this is a story you guys hadn't heard before. But I'm also using this video as an excuse to test some new technology. Please forgive the lighting. It's a little overblown in this room right now, but particularly I actually wanted to check the audio levels. So please post a comment below about what you think of the audio levels. I'm trying these new I like to continue using these if I can. So let's talk about this story. I had a friend for a very long time. She's a photographer, film, DSL, digital. She went to school for photography. She was an accomplished photographer and model. So obviously she was a Mac user. There's no question about it. We know this. Let's move on. Now, as long as I've known her, she had this MacBook Pro from 2010 or 2011. I can't remember. It wasn't a 2009 or earlier model. I'll get into why that's the case in a minute or two. For years, I was begging her to replace that unit. It was smashed. Like, literally, the years had not been kind to it, and she had not been kind to it. It was in pretty bad shape. The screen had been cracked at least twice. The touchpad had been cracked. The casing had been cracked. I had to replace the hard drive on that thing at least 2 times. But there was a lot that actually still worked on that machine. She actually did have regular backups actually made through Time Machine with it. She had her data on that machine. And the part of the reason why she had been able to keep that machine for as long as she had was because she had been responsibly doing backups and responsibly calling me when, things came up where the backups would be needed. So it had kept the longevity of that computer for a while. But anybody that knows the current Mac, the plan, calendar basically, would know that a Mac from 2011 or 2010 is no longer supported by the newer Mac operating systems. And if your computer is not compatible with the newest Mac operating systems, it essentially is completely outmoded at that point. And you should immediately start looking into replacing it. And the sooner the better. But she still thought that there were some options that we could do for things like upgrades, whether it be RAM upgrades, hard drive upgrades. But at this point, we had maxed out what we could do for upgrades for this thing. And I made one major backup for her. And I said, here's your backup. Get a new computer as soon as you can. And I can take this backup and do a recovery on it. And I thought she'd get back to me immediately. It turned out that immediately took a year. She had been using the computer. She continued to use it. And eventually it just completely died on her. Irrecoverably. And at that point, I got a call saying, can you fix this? So she brought it over. I pop it open. We have backups. She has a backup drive. I can't get it to boot. I can't get it into target disk mode. At this point, I tell her we have to go to the Apple Store. Now, for those of you guys especially for those of you who have older Macs, this even is the case with older PCs as well. But if you have had a computer previously then to the computer that you're currently going to purchase, it's not a good idea to set up your computer, particularly a Mac, as a new machine. The reason why, especially if you don't use iCloud, the reason why is because it's technically not a new machine. You have files, you have documents, you have important backup data, the iTunes data, whatever. You want that data onto your new machine. You want to bring that data over. And with Apple's data migration software, which is built into the Mac operating system for at least since like 10.4, you can, in fact, do that. And you should make use of those features. Otherwise, you're basically losing out on all that old data, especially if a lot of it is important to you. So what happened in this case? I take her to the Apple Store. I know she needs a replacement Mac computer, Mac laptop. And at this point, the M1 is out. I know the M1 is a reliable machine. I know there's no point in her buying a MacBook Pro because, again, those souped-up M1s weren't available yet. But I figured she was definitely going to need something with a lot of internal storage because I knew how big her system's hard drives were, and I knew for a fact that she had filled them up with photos and raw, because she shoots in raw photo. So she had lots and lots and lots of data that she was going to need to keep on that system. And so I knew she was going to need at least a 1 terabyte hard drive. So I go to the Mac store. I tell them she needs a MacBook Air 1 terabyte. They had at the time one model in stock. This was at a time when you could actually get higher storage capacity and bumped up spec Macs at the Apple store. Now, unfortunately, that's not possible. If you want a Mac with higher than stock spec, you actually have to go and purchase it on the Apple Store's website, which is fine. You can do that. I did that with what I ended up purchasing, but at that time, you could go to the store. So they give her a student discount, and they sell her the brand new MacBook Air. I take a look at the spec. The only model they had in stock that was at that storage capacity was a 16 gig model. So they bumped up a spec, but they did knock off like 100 or 200 because she was a student. So it was like free upgrade, right? And she wasn't complaining about getting the extra RAM. But now it got to a point where now Maniac has to step in and do his thing. Now, for those of you who have never upgraded a Mac but are interested in upgrading Macs, this is what you do. If you want to do a file transfer between one Mac and another Mac, particularly an older one to a newer one, and transfer all the data over, that includes your files, your programs, your settings, your profile information. All of that can be transferred. However, if you're not using iCloud, which costs a lot of money, let's be honest, over time. When I say over time, it's cheap for a month if you're going to use it for 1 month, but if you're going to use it for like 10 years, that's going to pay. You're paying, 10 years. Oh, God, that is a very large. Let's not go into that right now. But if you are interested in taking your data and moving it from one system to another, provided that old system still works, you can do that. However, it can be a bit of a pain, especially given how old your machine is, because there are only allowing for data transfer through specific routes. Now, if you're willing to use Ethernet and you've got a router, you're good. You can use that. It'll be slow, but it'll work. The other option is to use target disk mode. Now, target disk mode only supports, depending upon what model your computer was and how old it is, it does not support USB output. You can only get target disk mode to work in either FireWire mode or Thunderbolt 2 mode or Thunderbolt 3 mode, again, depending upon what model you have. And if your newer Apple computer, which uses Thunderbolt 3, it only uses Thunderbolt 3. So you can't use Thunderbolt 2 without an adapter, and you can't use FireWire without an adapter on top of the adapter. Now, I had actually done successfully a transfer from a Mac that actually used FireWire to a brand new Mac that used Thunderbolt 3. It was successful, I will say that. But it required $90 worth of cable. In this case, I had banked up, because this was a 2011 or so model, it had a Thunderbolt 2 output. It would have only taken, actually I take it back, it would have taken $90 worth of cable because, no, I take it back. I can't remember. I'm pretty certain a Thunderbolt 2 cable costs around $40. Don't quote me on that, but I'm pretty certain I remember it costing that much. A Thunderbolt 2 to Thunderbolt 3 adapter is, if I remember correctly, $50 still. So do the math on that one. For the case of the FireWire, it was a $10 FireWire cable plus a $30 FireWire to Thunderbolt 2 adapter plus still the $50. Not important, but needless to say, you're going to need adapters depending upon how old your hardware is. So what happens after that? I take the old system, I get the new system prepped up. I say, please prepare this new system to receive data. Don't set up a new Mac as a new Mac if you have old data. You're just going to be wasting time setting it up because you're going to have to wipe it again once you move the data over. So when you get the system ready to go, fire it up and tell it to prepare for bringing in data from an old system, whether it's a Mac or a Windows machine. I won't be talking about the Windows machine, but it is possible with extra software, but it's not important right now. I fire up target disk mode on the old system. I've got the Thunderbolt adapter. I've got the Thunderbolt cable. I plug it in. I tell the new computer to start looking for the old computer's data and profiles. Can't find anything. I disconnect the cable. I try booting in using the FireWire port instead. Can't find anything. If you can't find anything after that kind of search, your old computer, I'm sorry to say, has a broken hard drive. There's nothing further that can be done there. However, she had a backup. It was a USB 3 backup. We had a USB 3 adapter to loaded it up into the system. And we tried to see if we could boot to this hard drive. It could read the backup. Hallelujah. So I tell the computer, the new one, load a data migration from that time machine backup. She wasn't angry because of how old it was, because she hadn't really made any major changes to the system since that was done. Maybe she lost a file here or there, but mostly she was just doing web browsing. I figured, given the fact that this was a USB hard drive that was physical and not very new, I had seen nightmare scenarios where a backup recovery to a new system would take 3 to 5 hours. So we decided to run a crash program here, and I run a backup recovery, and I tell it, don't transfer the programs. So transfer all your profile settings, transfer your files, transfer everything else, but I tell it, don't transfer the programs. And here's why. The M1 software that the M1 processor is not going to be running x86 software, 32-bit software. And the majority of the software that she had installed on there was all before the 32-bit cutoff. There was just no way that she could run that software anyway, even if she could. And on top of that, even if you're doing data migration, a brand new Mac will come preloaded with the iLife and iWork suites, Pages, GarageBand, iMovie, Numbers. It's all still on there. And it's not going to delete itself unless you tell it to. So I tell it, don't transfer the programs, and she's lost the Creative Suite at this point, but I already knew that was going to happen. I told her she's going to have to buy a new Creative Suite, but we'll get into that later. But I told her, obviously, Pages, Numbers, GarageBand, Photos, all that stuff, just new versions. But the files that she created with them, they'll still work. So I ran the transfer, and she had access within about 30 minutes. The ports were that fast. Or maybe because we cut out all those programs, the transfer didn't take as long as it needed to. I run the system updates, we reboot. She logs into her profile, she can log in. She starts looking at this machine, which is running all of her old files, exactly as her old system was running. And she's just overwhelmed by how fast it is. But here was the one thing that I thought was kind of interesting. Before she installed the Creative Suite, like, she didn't install the Creative Suite with me. I didn't install the Creative Suite on that thing. She later installed it after she took it home with her. I think she used her academic license, and she purchased an academic license for the Creative Suite plan or something like that. She did that after the fact, but she said it worked just fine. She still had a lot of her old RAW files. that I had transferred. She wanted to make sure that all of her documents, all of her data, particularly all of those photos that she had shot from all those photo shoots that she had done over the years, were still intact. She assumed that she was going to need to have the Creative Suite installed to be able to see those files. So I didn't think that was going to be the case, because I knew for a fact that the modern iPhones, like particularly like the iPhone 12 and the iPhone 13 now, obviously, could read and make raw files that were not that dissimilar than the raw files that she was creating from her DSLR. And so I figured if the A13 or the A14 processor was close to the M1 in architecture, I figured that the operating to use to read a raw file was probably in the operating system right then and there. So I said, check it, see if you can run it right now. And she's like, I don't believe you, it won't work. I said, well, go looking through your raw files. So she loads up photos. She starts checking her legacy folders. She could see the raw files. Run them, no problem. Everyone she wanted, full resolution. The Mac could read them. And she was sold on what she had purchased. And she was so happy. And then later on, she installed the Creative Suite, and she was happy with that. And she's been happy with it ever since. So now I got one. Why did I get one? Well, with all this training from all this stuff that we've been doing, I figured it was time. It was time. The only difference was I was not going to buy a MacBook. I figured if I bought a MacBook of any type, one thing breaks, the whole thing would break. The keyboard breaks, I have to replace the whole, I wasn't going to be dealing with that. And that was also another reason why I was against buying an iMac. But the Mac Mini intrigued me. I figured the chipset and specifications for it was no different than the MacBook Air I had set up for my friend a year ago. The only difference is that instead of having built-in screen, keyboard, in touchscreen, I could just plug in a mouse, plug in a TV, plug in a monitor, plug in a keyboard, that sort of thing. And otherwise the performance would be the same. And that's what I'm going to do. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. Maybe we'll do a follow-up. Until next time, guys, my name is Maniac with GameAccess.net. Take care. Over and out.